Hello. What the Fidelity Analyst Survey does so well is to separate the noise, especially what we might hear in the media, from reality. Never a better time for that, you might think, than since the election of President Trump. I'm joined by two analysts who contributed to the report. Wen Lindroth, who covers power and utilities for fixed income, and Mark Wilson, who covers US industrials and autos for equities. Hello to you both. Mark, let me start with you. What's the real impact of the Trump administration on the companies that you cover?
Well, first of all, I'd say that things are already starting to get better for these companies because of the improvement in the oil price. But now the market is starting to speculate about infrastructure spending, about more spending in oil and gas, about higher confidence in small business, and also about lower tax rates for these corporates and what they might spend the money on instead.
But details are pretty thin on the ground still.
Very much so. So for example, with the infrastructure plan, there's talk of up to $1 trillion being spent. That's an order of magnitude bigger than the 2009 fiscal stimulus, but still really kind of lacking in detail on what that might be, whether it might be PPP investment, whether it might be sort of direct spending by the government itself.
But as you were saying, the environment around the companies was already getting better a bit before the change of administration.
Yeah, very much so. We'd seen a lot of companies in the way down saying that the drop in the oil price wouldn't affect them so much, and it turned out that it did. Now we're kind of seeing the reverse of that as the oil prices started to recover. Some
things are definitely above politics, secular trends, if you like, and one of them is renewable energy. When I want to talk to you about that. Now, President Trump doesn't strike me as a tree hugger, and he promised to reverse decades of decline in the coal industry on the campaign trail. But are the wind companies that you cover, are their feathers ruffled by all this?
Yes, well, I think at the outset one was fearful that it would roll back wind and solar investment, but I think there's a few things to keep in mind here. First of all, the renewables industry is responsible for at least 300,000 jobs in the United States. Many of those wind jobs in particular are located in the middle of the country, which are largely Republican. And so to the extent that Republican senators and governors and congressmen want to keep those jobs around, they're going to continue to push for more wind and more solar.
So a real electoral reason to maintain the investment in or the support for wind energy.
Absolutely. And if you think the election was about jobs in the Midwest, then keeping wind and solar alive is definitely part of that. And there's also another important component, which is that the investment is being supported by production tax credits and investment tax credits, which are embedded in a tax deal passed by the Republican-led Congress last December, and it was contained in a bill crafted by Paul Ryan. So the tax credits extend until 2020, 2021, and it would be very difficult for Trump's administration to turn back that legislation.
And Mark, what about regulation on emissions that affects your auto sector companies as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So those guys have not hung about in lobbying the new president to try and reduce the weight of regulation on their businesses, and I think it's fair of them to call for harmonization across those different aspects. Whether they're able to get him to reduce the targets and make life easier for them overall, I think that's a little bit more debatable.
What are the disruptive trends that you're seeing that are going to continue nevertheless?
Well, we've done a lot of work on that on the auto side of things, and actually, talking about electric vehicles, that's something that we don't see as that disruptive. It may well continue to grow penetration, but it's not something that's going to revolutionize the auto industry itself. Something that has potential to do that a little bit more perhaps would be autonomous cars, and the work we've done on that has shown that because of consumer demand for more safe vehicles, we're going to see a very sharp ramp up in so-called kind of low-level autonomy and things like automatic emergency braking, that kind of stuff. And then probably within the next 5 years, you'll see fully autonomous cars starting to hit the road, and that's quite a substantial change in direction, and that really happens no matter what president is in office.
And just on that same theme, there's actually a project that both of you are involved in that of discussion when on that ties in the power aspect.
Yes, the use of batteries in electric vehicles has a sort of a crossover appeal to the power industry, and so it's potentially transformative for my industry as well as Mark's. If we can achieve low-cost batteries to store electricity, then that could really change the structure of the industry. It could smooth out the peaks as well as reduce the need for installed capacity in the ground. And that could mean that utilities, the way they've looked for the last 100 years, may not necessarily be the way they look going forward. So internally at Fidelity, the global utility analysts are working on a project to predict what the future of the industry is going to look like. It's not going to be transformative for the next 5 or 10 years, but 10 years plus, we could see some real massive change.
So a real long-term horizon there. Just finally, what are some of the second-order impacts of some of President Trump's policies and the reflationary aspect that will touch both of your worlds in different ways? Mark, first of all.
So for me, with two hats on covering industrials and autos, it's quite different. Industrial companies tend to do quite well in a reflationary environment, and of course all of these companies that have big pension deficits, you see those deficits shrink as the rates rise. For autos it's slightly different because even though there's talk of income tax cuts for consumers and how that might stimulate consumer demand, as interest rates rise, that's going to have quite a substantial effect on the affordability of cars for consumers. So you may see that even if they have more money in their pocket, their next purchase isn't quite as affordable as they would perhaps hope, and that potentially puts a bit of a dampener on US auto demand.
And when you're looking at the debt side of things, how is it changing the company's behavior?
Higher interest rates are generally negative for utility stocks, which are high dividend paying stocks. So that net is negative. I would say on the credit side, it's more or less neutral because most regulated utilities, they simply pass through the cost of their debt to the customers. So it's a neutral impact for credit. And for the business on a fundamental basis, I think longer term it's a positive because returns on equity are going to rise as interest rates rise, and that's going to be good for utility returns.
Good to end on a positive note. Wen and Mark, thank you both very much indeed, and thank you for watching.
投资一定有风险，基金投资有赚有赔，申购前应详阅公开说明书或投资人须知。